When someone lets you go thinking you'll crawl back, they are testing something they never truly understood: your self-worth. They believe that your silence will eventually break, that your love will weaken your resolve, and that your heart will eventually betray your strength. But walking away with dignity is the kind of power that doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to prove anything. It simply says, I know my value, even if you don't. That moment when you decide to walk away, not in anger, not in desperation, but in quiet confidence, is the moment your life begins to shift in ways you cannot yet imagine. You see, the most powerful decision you can ever make is to walk away from what no longer serves your growth. People often confuse love with attachment, thinking that holding on tighter will bring healing, when in truth, it only deepens the wound. Dignity, on the other hand, is born from self-respect. It is the energy of knowing you don't need to chase something that was never meant to be yours. The one who thought you'd crawl back expected you to move from weakness, not wisdom. They thought your emotions would outweigh your self-control. But what they didn't realize is that dignity grows in silence. Strength matures in stillness. There's a moment after the heartbreak when your mind becomes your battlefield. You replay the words, the moments, the memories. You question yourself, wondering if walking away was the right decision. But then something powerful happens. You remember who you were before they made you doubt your own worth. You start to reclaim the fragments of yourself that you gave away so easily. Every time you resist the urge to reach out, every time you choose peace over pain, you are silently rebuilding yourself. You are no longer reacting to loss, you are responding to life. Dignity isn't loud. It doesn't need to announce that it's done. It simply leaves when it recognizes that staying will cost more than it's worth. The one who let you go did so because they thought your love depended on their validation. They thought you couldn't stand on your own. But when you choose to walk away with grace, you dismantle that illusion entirely. There's something about quiet strength that unsettles people who expected you to crumble. Your silence becomes a mirror, forcing them to confront the truth they tried to ignore. They never truly knew who you were. Walking away with dignity is not about pride, it's about self-preservation. It's the art of choosing yourself without apology. It's the understanding that begging for attention only drains your power, while standing firm in your decision restores it. The energy of dignity doesn't chase, it attracts. When you hold your ground, you begin to magnetize better things into your life. Opportunities, people, peace, and clarity. You start to notice how life reorganizes itself in your favor once you let go of what was keeping you small. There's a certain silence that follows dignity, an unspoken peace that replaces the chaos of emotional dependency. You no longer need to convince anyone of your value because your actions speak for you. The very act of walking away becomes a declaration of self-worth. It tells the universe, I am ready for something greater. That's when life begins to honor you. That's when doors open, not because you forced them, but because your energy shifted from need to knowing. Every time you resist the temptation to go back, you are rewriting your story. You're telling yourself that you no longer seek completion from someone else. You are already whole. You are no longer the same person who tolerated disrespect, who accepted crumbs, who waited to be chosen. You've evolved into someone who chooses themselves, and that shift is permanent. The one who thought you'd return will eventually realize that your silence was not emptiness. It was transformation. There's beauty in dignity. It doesn't come from bitterness. It comes from understanding. You understand that love should never cost you your peace. You understand that no amount of explaining can make someone value what they are determined to take for granted. You understand that when you carry yourself with self-respect, even your absence will speak volumes. The same silence they once mocked becomes the very thing that haunts them. Walking away with dignity means accepting that you cannot control how others treat you, but you can always control how you respond. It's about reclaiming your emotional power one choice at a time. When you choose not to beg, not to chase, not to shrink yourself for the sake of someone else's comfort, you begin to step into your own authority. That's when you begin to move differently, calmer, wiser, more centered. The chaos that once ruled your emotions fades, replaced by a quiet certainty that you no longer need to fight for a place in someone's life. And what happens after that is nothing short of miraculous. You begin to notice the shift in your own reflection. Your energy changes. You carry yourself differently. The pain that once broke you becomes the foundation of your strength. You no longer look back wishing things were different. Instead, you look ahead, knowing that everything unfolded exactly as it needed to. Because if they hadn't let you go, you might never have learned how powerful it is to stand on your own feet in silence with dignity that cannot be shaken. He thought you would come crawling back. He believed that your emotions would overpower your logic, that your loneliness would weaken your strength, and that eventually you would fold under the weight of your feelings. What he didn't realize was that the very act of being underestimated can awaken something powerful inside a person. When someone assumes you will crumble without them, they unknowingly hand you the motivation to rise higher than you ever have before. He thought you would fall apart, but instead you found yourself. He thought you would chase, but instead you chose to grow. Pain became your greatest teacher, and heartbreak became the soil in which your strength began to bloom. At first, it hurt deeply. The silence was heavy, the memories loud. You questioned your worth, you doubted your decisions, you wondered if you should have done more, said more, fought more. But slowly, something inside you began to shift. You started to realize that love should never be proven through suffering. The love that requires you to lose yourself is not love at all. It's bondage disguised as affection. The moment you understood that, you stopped waiting for his return. You stopped chasing a ghost of what once was. You began to reclaim your energy from every moment that drained you, every memory that held you hostage. That is how transformation begins. Not in revenge, but in realization. He expected weakness, but what he saw instead was distance. The distance between who you were and who you were becoming. The version of you that once begged for attention no longer existed. You were no longer driven by the need to be seen by him. You began to see yourself. You stopped explaining your worth and you started embodying it. You stopped needing validation and you started living in alignment with your truth. You no longer looked for closure from him. You found it within. That is the kind of power that changes the entire story. Growth doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it shows up in the smallest choices. The way you stop checking your phone for messages, the way you no longer replay old conversations, the way you no longer justify being treated poorly. Each of those moments is a quiet revolution within your soul. The same person who once felt lost without him is now unrecognizable. You learned how to give yourself the love you kept trying to get from someone else. You learned that peace feels better than attention. You learned that solitude can be sacred when your energy is no longer scattered. He thought your silence meant you were broken. What he didn't know is that silence is where true power is built. You stopped reacting. You stopped defending yourself. You stopped participating in the cycles that kept you small. While he was waiting for you to return, you were outgrowing the version of yourself that needed him. You started feeding your mind with strength, your soul with stillness, and your heart with purpose. That kind of healing doesn't happen overnight, but when it happens, it changes everything. You began to see the world differently. You started to understand that rejection is often redirection, and endings are often the beginning of something divine. He thought losing you was temporary, but for you, it became the doorway to rebirth. You began to love yourself with the same intensity you once gave to him. You began to rebuild your life, not to prove him wrong, but to remind yourself that you never needed his approval to be whole. You started showing up for yourself, eating better, thinking deeper, dreaming bigger. Each step you took away from him was a step toward your purpose. Growth often happens quietly in private moments of clarity. There were days when you cried, but you didn't reach out. There were nights when you missed him, but you chose peace. There were times when you almost went back. But then you remembered how it felt to lose yourself trying to keep him. Those moments tested your strength, but they also revealed it. The very pain that was meant to break you became the fire that forged your new identity. That's the irony of growth. It often comes disguised as loss. He thought time would wear down your resolve, that nostalgia would weaken your heart. But what time really did was heal your perspective. It gave you distance, and distance gave you wisdom. You began to see patterns for what they were. You realized that love shouldn't feel like waiting, like confusion, like silence. Love should bring clarity, peace, and mutual respect. Once you understood that, you stopped romanticizing potential and started valuing reality. You accepted that some people are not meant to grow with you. They were only meant to awaken you. You outgrew the version of yourself that settled for almosts. You stopped waiting for someone to realize your value and started living like you already knew it. You became the woman who doesn't chase, who doesn't beg, who doesn't break at the sight of rejection. The one who thought you'd come crawling back now wonders how you became untouchable, how your energy shifted, how your silence speaks louder than any words could. The truth is, he never lost control. You simply reclaimed it. You took back every piece of yourself you had given away. You started loving yourself so completely that no one's absence could make you feel incomplete again. Growth is quiet but undeniable. It's the way your energy changes when you stop looking back. It's the way your peace deepens when you stop seeking closure from those who thrive on chaos. It's the way you begin to move with calm confidence, no longer seeking to prove your worth to anyone. He thought you'd return because he believed you needed him. But you discovered something far greater. You only ever needed yourself. Silence has a language of its own, a language so profound that it can echo louder than any words ever could. When you chose not to explain yourself, not to defend your worth, and not to chase after someone who failed to recognize what they had, your silence began to speak for you. It spoke in ways that words never could. It carried the weight of your pain, your wisdom, and your transformation all at once. People who once took your voice for granted suddenly found themselves haunted by your quiet. The very absence they thought would go unnoticed began to speak volumes about who you had become and what you were no longer willing to tolerate. There comes a moment when you realize that no amount of talking can make someone hear you. No amount of proving can make someone value you. And no amount of explaining can make someone understand what they are not ready to see. That's when silence becomes your greatest weapon. It's not an act of pride, it's an act of power. It's the realization that your energy is sacred and that every word you speak carries value. You stop wasting it on ears that refuse to listen and hearts that cannot comprehend your depth. Silence becomes your boundary, your declaration, your healing. When you stop explaining yourself to those who misused your vulnerability, you begin to see how much peace exists in not being understood. You no longer need to justify why you walked away or why you chose to remain distant. The truth doesn't require validation, it stands on its own. The one who doubted your strength now feels the void you left behind. They might try to interpret your silence as indifference, but it's far deeper than that. It's wisdom, it's control. It's you finally realizing that peace is found not in convincing someone to stay, but in knowing when to let them go. Silence exposes truth. When you stop speaking, people are forced to listen to themselves. They replay their actions, their words, their choices, and that reflection becomes uncomfortable. The quiet you left behind becomes their mirror. They begin to remember the things you said, the moments they ignored, the love they took for granted. What they once dismissed as your weakness now reveals itself as your greatest strength. Because silence demands attention. It creates curiosity. It makes them wonder what you're thinking, how you're doing, and why you haven't reached out. The one who once held your presence so casually now feels the weight of your absence deeply. You see, when someone underestimates your silence, they misunderstand its meaning. Silence doesn't always mean you have nothing to say. It means you've chosen not to waste your breath on someone who never valued it. You've learned that not every battle is worth fighting, and not every person deserves access to your thoughts. Silence gives you space to heal. It allows you to observe without reacting. It helps you regain control over your emotions and your narrative. You no longer operate from pain, you move from peace. In a world that glorifies noise, constant communication, endless validation, and emotional reaction, choosing silence is a form of rebellion. It's saying, I don't need to prove my worth by explaining it. It's refusing to feed into drama or to chase after those who walked away easily. Your silence becomes a wall of dignity. It protects your energy and amplifies your value. The less you say, the more they notice. The quieter you become, the louder your presence feels. Because silence isn't emptiness, it's awareness. It's the space where clarity is born and truth begins to surface. You started to see how much power lies in restraint. The power to not respond to every message. The power to not defend yourself when misunderstood. The power to simply walk away without a word. That kind of self-control intimidates people who are used to chaos. They expected an argument, a breakdown, a desperate plea. But instead, you gave them silence. And in that silence, they began to see your worth more clearly than they ever did when you were explaining yourself. The energy shifted completely. You were no longer the one seeking closure. You became the closure. Silence teaches you more about people than words ever could. When you stop talking, you see who reaches out and who disappears. You see who values your peace and who only valued your presence when it benefited them. You begin to understand that some connections were never rooted in love. They were rooted in convenience. And that realization doesn't make you bitter. It makes you wise. Because now you move differently. You conserve your energy for the ones who understand your silence, not for those who demand your explanations. Your silence becomes your healing space. It's where your thoughts realign, where your emotions settle, and where your spirit finds balance again. You no longer live to be understood. You live to be at peace. You start finding strength in saying nothing because not every situation deserves your reaction. You start valuing quiet mornings, still evenings, and peaceful solitude more than any apology you never received. And while others may see your silence as distance, it's really you coming home to yourself. There is something undeniably magnetic about silence after chaos. It confuses those who expected you to break and captivates those who recognize your growth. The one who once thrived on your attention will notice how much your absence speaks. Every unspoken word, every unanswered message, every unreturned call carries a weight that cannot be ignored. Silence doesn't chase, it compels. It pulls at the conscience of those who once thought they had control. Because when you stop speaking, they start remembering. They remember the kindness in your tone, the warmth in your words, the softness in your presence. And when all of that is gone, silence becomes the echo of everything they lost. There comes a time in every person's life when love begins to feel like a mirror, reflecting not only the beauty of connection, but also the shadows of dependency. When you were deeply attached, you believed that love meant holding on, no matter how much it hurt. You confused attachment with devotion and comfort with connection. You thought that if you loved harder, they would see your worth, that if you stayed longer, they would change. But attachment is not love. It's fear disguised as loyalty. It's the fear of being alone, the fear of letting go, the fear of starting over. The shift from attachment to awareness begins when that fear finally breaks, when you realize that holding on to what's hurting you is the very thing keeping you from healing. At first, that realization is painful. You feel it deep in your chest, where hope once lived. You look back on all the times you stayed silent to keep the peace, all the times you made excuses for behavior that tore pieces of you apart. You see how much of yourself you gave away in exchange for a love that was never truly returned. But then awareness begins to awaken inside you. It starts as a whisper, telling you that love should not feel like sacrifice, that peace should not feel like distance, that being alone should not feel like punishment. You start to question everything you once accepted. You begin to understand that love rooted in attachment isn't freedom, it's dependency. Awareness brings clarity, and clarity is both a blessing and a confrontation. You begin to see that you weren't really in love with the person. You were in love with the potential, the idea, the illusion of who they could be. You held on to memories, not the present moment. You kept chasing what once felt real, even when reality was showing you something different. Awareness strips away the illusions. It shows you that your longing was not for the other person, but for the part of you that felt alive when you were loved. And now that you are awake, you start to see that you can feel alive again without needing anyone else to complete you. There is a deep stillness that comes when awareness replaces attachment. It's not that you stop loving, you just stop clinging. You no longer make decisions from fear or desperation. You no longer seek validation from someone's attention. You begin to see love as something that flows naturally, not something that must be forced or begged for. You begin to respect yourself enough to walk away from anything that costs you your inner peace. That's the moment your power returns. Because the truth is, awareness doesn't take love away, it purifies it. It removes the illusion and reveals what's real. And sometimes what's real is that you need to let go to grow. Awareness teaches you that you can love someone deeply and still recognize that they are not meant for you. You can appreciate what was shared without needing to go back. You start to understand that endings are not failures. They are transitions. Every connection has a purpose. And sometimes that purpose is simply to teach you what love is not. You realize that the attachment was not about them. It was about the unhealed parts of you that wanted to feel seen, understood, and chosen. Once you start healing those parts yourself, the need for attachment fades. You become your own source of comfort, your own home. The shift from attachment to awareness also changes how you see yourself. You no longer define your value by someone's choice to stay or leave. You stop questioning your worth every time someone withdraws their affection. You stop seeking closure from people who never had the emotional depth to give it. Instead, you find closure within your own clarity. You start to trust your intuition again. The same intuition you ignored when the red flags were waving in front of you. You learn that awareness is not about bitterness, it's about discernment. You no longer react from pain, you respond from understanding. As your awareness deepens, you begin to see love differently. You no longer crave intensity, you crave consistency. You no longer want someone who promises everything. You want someone whose actions align with their words. You stop romanticizing chaos and start valuing peace. You understand that true love doesn't require you to lose yourself. It helps you become more of who already are. Awareness brings you to a place of balance where love no longer feels like survival but like harmony. There's a freedom that comes when attachment dissolves. You stop trying to control outcomes. You stop waiting for someone to fill your emptiness. You start realizing that the love you were searching for outside of yourself was always meant to be found within. You begin to nurture your dreams again, to rebuild your confidence, to reconnect with your purpose. You start to glow differently, move differently, think differently. The energy that was once consumed by fear and longing now fuels your growth and self-expression. That is what awareness does. It liberates you. And as you continue to evolve, something beautiful happens. You no longer carry resentment toward those who couldn't love you the way you needed. You start to see them as mirrors, reflecting your unhealed patterns and helping you awaken to your worth. You don't need revenge, you don't need validation, you don't even need closure. You simply rise. You rise above the emotional chaos that once defined you. You rise into self-trust, self-compassion, and emotional clarity. The love you once begged for becomes the love you naturally attract. Because when you move from attachment to awareness, you stop chasing what was never aligned with your spirit and start aligning yourself with what was always meant for you. You didn't rebuild yourself to prove him wrong. You didn't wake up every day with the thought of revenge in your heart. You didn't chase success, peace, or transformation to show anyone what they lost. You did it for you. You did it because you were tired of feeling empty, tired of waiting for someone else to fix what they didn't break, tired of giving your power away to people who didn't value it. Your comeback wasn't born from bitterness. It was born from realization. The realization that no one was coming to save you, that no apology could heal you, and that no validation could replace the love you were meant to give yourself. That's when everything started to change. At first, you didn't even notice the transformation. You were just trying to survive the storm. You were trying to make sense of the silence, to find purpose in the pain, to stay strong when your heart felt like it was crumbling. But slowly, your spirit began to rebuild itself. You started to move differently. You stopped explaining your choices to people who never understood your vision. You stopped seeking comfort from those who caused your confusion. You started to rely on yourself in a way you never had before. The same pain that once broke you became the foundation of your new strength. Every scar became a lesson. Every tear became a teacher. Every lonely night became a chapter in your rebirth. There is something powerful about rebuilding yourself quietly. You didn't announce it. You didn't post about it. You just started showing up differently. You began to protect your energy, to speak less, to observe more. You learned that not every emotion deserves a reaction. Not every wound deserves exposure, and not every person deserves access to you. You became selective, not because you were cold, but because you finally understood that your peace was sacred. You stopped needing to be understood by everyone because you finally understood yourself. The world starts to notice when your energy changes. The same people who once doubted you, ignored you, or underestimated, you start to feel your absence in ways they can't explain. They start to wonder how you managed to glow after everything you went through. What they don't realize is that your glow didn't come from their validation. It came from your healing. It came from nights of choosing to pray instead of panic, from mornings where you refused to carry yesterday's pain into today's peace. It came from the moment you decided to rebuild your life, not from the pieces someone left behind, but from the strength that never left you. Rebuilding yourself for you means accepting that your worth was never tied to who stayed or who left. It means recognizing that love, real love, starts with how you treat yourself when no one else is watching. You began to pour into yourself with the same energy you once gave to others. You started investing in your dreams, your growth, your purpose. You became your own source of encouragement, your own safe place, your own reason to keep going. You stopped waiting for closure from people who couldn't even handle the truth. You gave yourself permission to move forward without looking back. Your comeback became spiritual. It wasn't just about success or external validation. It was about alignment. You started to feel connected to yourself in a deeper way. You began to attract peace instead of chaos, authenticity instead of pretense, and clarity instead of confusion. The people who once drained you could no longer reach you because you started operating on a higher frequency. You began to see how much beauty there is in solitude, how much power there is in silence, and how much strength there is in letting go gracefully. You learned that healing doesn't mean you forget what happened. It means it no longer controls you. It means you can remember without bitterness, reflect without pain, and move on without resentment. You no longer wake up hoping they'll realize your worth because you've already realized it yourself. You no longer replay old conversations in your mind because you've accepted that not every story deserves a sequel. You've learned to bless the past and build from it. That's what true growth looks like. It's not about proving anyone wrong. It's about proving to yourself that you can rise no matter what tried to break you. Every time you chose peace over reaction, every time you walked away instead of arguing, every time you focused on yourself instead of seeking attention, you were rebuilding your life. You were writing a new story, one rooted in strength, grace, and wisdom. You stopped living in reaction to pain and started living in response to purpose. You became grounded, intentional, and unshakable. You learned that your worth doesn't fluctuate based on someone else's ability to see it. You stopped being defined by the person who left and started being defined by the person you became after they did. And in that process, you discovered something sacred. Peace feels better than being right. Growth feels better than revenge. Healing feels better than proving a point. You found a strength within you that didn't need to be seen to be real. You stopped trying to show the world how far you've come and started simply living it. You realized that your glow up wasn't for them to notice. It was for you to feel. You found joy in your solitude, clarity in your silence, and purpose in your pain. Every time you smiled without a reason, every time you laughed again without pretending, every time you looked in the mirror and saw peace instead of sadness, you were winning in ways no one could measure. Rebuilding yourself for you means no longer living in the shadows of who hurt you. It means stepping into your light unapologetically without needing anyone's permission to shine. It means walking through life with grace, not because everything is perfect, but because you finally understand that your value was never determined by how someone else treated you. You are not what you lost. You are what you became after surviving it. You are not the broken version they left behind. You are the healed version they never got to meet. When you finally refused to crawl back, something powerful began to unfold in your life. It was as if the universe took a deep breath and said, "No, you're ready." There is a sacred reward that comes to those who choose peace over chaos, self-respect over validation, and growth over comfort. The moment you decided not to return to what broke you, you sent a silent message to the universe that you were ready for something greater. Life listens to that kind of strength. It begins to open doors that were once hidden. It begins to align you with opportunities and people that match your new energy. And it begins to unfold blessings that can only come to those who have learned to walk away with grace. At first, it doesn't feel like a reward. It feels like emptiness. The silence after separation can be heavy. The quiet can feel unbearable. You miss what was familiar, even if it was painful. You wonder if you made the right choice, if maybe you should have stayed a little longer, fought a little harder. But as time passes, the space that once felt like loss begins to feel like freedom. You start to breathe differently. You wake up with a little more clarity, a little more strength. The same moments that once hurt you start teaching you. The same pain that once weakened you starts shaping you. And that's when life begins to show you what happens when you choose yourself. You start to notice that the energy around you changes. Where there was once confusion, there is now clarity. Where there was once chaos, there is peace. The same things that used to trigger you no longer hold power over your emotions. You respond with calm instead of reaction. You observe instead of absorb. You begin to realize that walking away wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning of everything. Life rewards those who learn how to detach with dignity. It honors the souls that no longer settle for half love, half effort, or half truths. When you refuse to return to what drains you, you create space for what fulfills you. The universe has a way of testing your strength. It will send situations that tempt you to go back to settle, to repeat the same patterns that once hurt you. But every time you say no, every time you hold your ground, every time you choose peace instead of pain, you elevate. You start to see how powerful self-control really is. The things that once consumed your energy now lose their grip on you. You're no longer chasing closure, validation, or attention. You're too focused on your peace to care about being understood. And that's when the universe starts to move differently for you. It begins to match your energy to mirror your self-worth, to reward your discipline. There's a divine shift that takes place when you choose not to return to what's familiar. You start to attract experiences that reflect your growth. The right people begin to enter your life. People who respect your boundaries, who value your energy, who bring calm instead of confusion. You find yourself in places you once dreamed of, doing things you never believed you could do. That's not coincidence. That's alignment. When you stop repeating lessons, life finally promotes you to new levels. You begin to understand that the blessings you once prayed for were waiting for you on the other side of letting go. And while those who expected you to crawl back are left confused by your silence, you are quietly evolving. Your energy shifts. Your aura changes. You no longer look like someone who needs saving. You look like someone who has already been reborn. The confidence that comes from walking away with dignity cannot be manufactured. It's real. It's earned through sleepless nights, silent tears, and the decision to heal even when it hurt. You no longer seek revenge because you understand that your success, your peace, and your growth are the greatest forms of closure. When life sees that you are no longer entertaining what doesn't align with your purpose, it begins to bless you differently. It replaces everything you lost with something better. Peace that can't be disturbed, joy that doesn't depend on circumstances, and opportunities that feel effortless. You realize that the moment you let go, the energy that once kept you stuck is now fueling your elevation. Every no you said to the past becomes a yes to the future. Every boundary you set becomes a bridge towards something higher. Life has a way of rewarding obedience to your inner voice, especially when that voice told you to walk away. The same person who once doubted if they could make it without the other now looks back with gratitude. You start to understand why certain things didn't work out, because they weren't meant to. The pain that once felt unfair now feels necessary. It shaped your discernment, sharpened your intuition, and strengthened your faith. The very thing that once tried to destroy you became the reason you discovered your own power. You learned that walking away doesn't mean you lost. It means you trusted yourself enough to choose peace over attachment. That trust becomes the foundation for everything that follows. And as you continue moving forward, life begins to mirror that inner peace back to you. You wake up lighter. You think clearer, you love deeper. You're no longer waiting for someone to return or regret losing you, because you've outgrown that version of yourself. You've entered a new chapter where your worth is non-negotiable, your peace is protected, and your boundaries are sacred. The universe keeps rewarding you, not because you were perfect, but because you finally aligned with truth. You learn that real love starts within, that real healing begins in silence, and that real power is found in letting go gracefully. The moment you stopped returning to what hurt you, life began to rise to meet you, blessing you in ways you once thought were impossible.